Before we dig in, a quick thank you to the sponsors ready to grow with the Soil Sisters. Tejas Tonic is the official beverage of the Texas Soil Sisters. We especially love that the hemp for Tejas Tonic is organically farmed in the Texas Hill Country, with farms in both Dripping Springs and Lukenbach, Texas. The Soil Sisters podcast is powered by B&P Electric. Whether you're building, remodeling, installing low-voltage landscape lighting, or in need of an inspection, B&P is your Central Texas electrical contractor. Find links to our sponsors in the podcast show notes or head over to txsoilsisters.co. You're listening to the Soil Sisters podcast, where we dig in on family farming and ranching, regenerative agriculture, healthy living, and planting seeds in our community. We invite you to listen, subscribe, and grow with the Soil Sisters. I'm Joanna Newting, joined by my blood, soul, and soil sister, Crystal. Welcome to the show.
Hello, sister. Very excited about our special guest today.
Yes, the one and only Wayne Knight, the executive director of Holistic Management International. We had the privilege of being students of Wayne's at Regen Ag School last fall. Wayne has 30 years of ranching experience. They have a South African 11,000 acre cattle ranch. And I feel like if we're going to get advice on ranching from somebody, Wayne's a pretty good guy.
I agree.
He's also been a holistic management educator for 17 years. So, Wayne, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know it's spring, everything's popping, but I know it's windy out there. So we all get the luxury of being indoors and getting to chat about holistic management and why that's the holy grail for being a farmer or rancher with peace of mind and money in your pocket.
Yes.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. It's great to be speaking to you. Yeah, it certainly helped me. Holy Grail, useful stuff, really useful stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah, we don't want Christians to run away. We don't have to call it the Holy Grail, but it sure is important. And the skills and the thought process that holistic management trains you for, this blueprint or, path that it sets you out on, it sure is different than what a lot of people find themselves in as land stewards or owners of farms and ranches. Like, people aren't necessarily doing it this way. And the things that we have seen in our short, less than 1 year of actually having holistic management on our mind, it seems like a game changer.
It certainly is. I think a mentor of mine, of many of us in holistic management, wonderful gentleman, Don Campbell from Canada, he says something like, if you want to make small changes, change the way you do things. If you want to make big changes, change the way you think about things. And for me, holistic management certainly helped me think differently. It wasn't business as usual. It wasn't making little nitty-gritty changes. It was thinking in a different way about a lot of things, particularly environment, but really understanding what it is that I wanted, what it was that my family wanted is a hugely important beginning first step. Being really clear about what makes you tick, what drives you, and then these wonderful insights into how does a prairie operate, how does grassland, how do cows interact, and what is our role as managers or land stewards in enabling, not just managing is a word that we grow up with, but using the tools available to us, whether that's technologies or animals or fire or whatever, thinking differently about how we put those things together to be the best stewards, and how rewarding that is when you start thinking about that and when you start implementing this framework, this management framework. it's pretty powerful stuff.
I love this. And so I would like to start with the basic, what is holistic management for the day-to-day issues that you see land stewards facing?
Okay, so I think we're starting with management in a holistic way. That's what holistic management's about. So often when we come to a management decision, we're putting on a livestock production hat, or we're putting on a rangeland science, rangeland health hat, or we looking at family and we put on a family decision hat, and we make those decisions in isolation when in reality they're all connected. The holistic management framework is about making really good decisions, as I started out, based on thought and discussion as a family about what it is you really want. It sounds very simple, and it actually is, right? How do you make decisions in those realms? And here's a framework. I mean, the goal setting, we call it a holistic goal, is the fundamental. How do you simultaneously plan for your value system, what it is that you want to live for and by, and at the same time ensure that your environment is on a improving trajectory? How do you make sure that that's happening at the same time? And yes, it's about planning. It's about visioning. I love this. You know, everything's created twice. You have this first creation, which is in your head, and you have the second creation, which is turning what's in your head into reality. Whether you're an artist or a rangeland manager or a breeder of animals, or all of those things together, you first have to envision before you can create in reality. It's that two-step process. And what this holistic goal does is it enables you to imagine, well, what does the future look like so that my kids and my grandkids or the next generations can live the harmonious value system that we want to live. And it's about implementing in a way to achieve both those values for now, that quality of life for now, and making sure that that's enabled into the future. That's the crux of what we're trying to do. And it's going to be unique for everyone. We all have talents, we all have knowledge, we all have constraints. Within those variables, let's put together this goal and enable that to happen. I love the tension between these concepts, between the current and the future, between the financial and the wealth of the land, because you need money to make the business work, and you need land health to be improving to really grow your wealth potential. Without those two components, things start to fall apart. We can get into how do you do that. That's applying the management framework and the planning processes.
When you say in the very beginning, very simply, it's management done holistically. It's like, yes, what are all of the dots here, instead of, drawers where most people compartmentalize, and it's like, this is family, this is farming growth, this is the livestock, here's our hunting operation. But how are all of these things cohesively working together and almost sniff testing them against the holistic goal that you and your family set?
Yeah. And that is what you're saying is fundamental here. It's most of us, I feel, don't have enough conversations about what we collectively want. We don't even have those conversations deeply enough with ourselves. We kind of go with it. We assume others know, or we assume that we are on the same page. When you start digging in, it isn't comfortable, especially with multiple generations, but even within a same generation, it becomes more easy once you start doing it. When you're in this and living it, once you've started, we spend a lot of time discussing an imperfect holistic goal. When you're starting out, it seems like this really uncomfortable place because you've got these elements that don't sit comfortably with you. And if you're using your goal, it pretty quickly becomes evident what's missing, because now you're testing and well, the goal doesn't really make provision for that. We're testing something and it's not clear, but there's something's missing. As soon as you start applying, you suddenly realize, well, there are gaps. We need to fit in this, or we said this 5 years ago when we put this goal together. That's changed. We need to modify this. So it's a living communication process as well as means to a collective end, because there's so much in collective. I think it's not authoritarian. It is, how do we do this best for you and for me and for whoever else is involved in the endeavor.
And this is what I love so much about all of this, is that it is constantly, it's a living and breathing thing. We are adjusting and putting our goals into practice. And I tell people often in my sessions, whatever you're doing is what you're going to do. So you have to decide you're going to do something different, because once you begin shifting that, then all the things around that change.
Yeah.
And this is so in alignment with living your highest and best self and allowing the land to be that. And I love when you talk about the tension between those two things, because that is, we can do all the things that we want to, but that requires an adjustment in how we're thinking about things. And it really is like that. And it's okay that life is about tensions and, transits, moving through and getting through whatever. But just the way that it's done is so important.
I mean, there is definitely discomfort in discussing difference, and there is commitment in, this is what I want. I mean, that's quite a scary thing to some. But if you recognize that it's an evolution of, it's an extraction, it's a testing, it's a probing, it all makes sense. What I particularly like in facilitating the process is how clear the monetary aspect crystallizes thought. You will like something that you know makes you money a lot more once you crunch the numbers and know where it stands. So often people who haven't done the number side of things have a hunch of what they like, and as soon as it's gone through and it's now in we've done the planning, or even better, we've actually tried it out and this is where the money's taking us, suddenly that clarity of financial outcome really does influence positively too. So it's not about too much airy-fairy. There is this, I'm good at it, I'm feeling good about it, but there's also, hey, if it pays, it stays. And man, we'll love sheep a lot better if we know how much more money they make us than cows. For example, I'm not saying you must be a sheep but people who do the numbers and figure out, well, sheep are this much more profitable than cows. Well, yes. They love their sheep a whole lot more suddenly.
Well,
to invest more time.
100%. And so that brings me to the idea of the benefits of holistic management. So, a lot of folks don't do much planning. And so when we're talking about holistic management, where we're planning around our soil and our ecosystem and the animals and the humans that are living on there with the animals and their lifestyle and the community that surrounds it, when holistic management is looking at all of these things, then the benefits that you will see are going to be not only something that you feel, but something that you're going to see in your P&L.
Right. I mean, there's so many facets to this aspect. I think for me, the most rewarding part is watching a piece of land recover. I'll be happy to admit I've got lots of experience as being a rancher. A lot of it was pretty negative because I made a lot of mistakes. But even with those mistakes, you see improvement. If you start working with nature, nature is incredibly forgiving. And that, for my personality, for what I hold dear, watching land improve dramatically over my nearly 30 years of ranching, it's stunning to see what happens when you give longer recovery to plants, when you graze more effectively. I tended to err on the side of pushing environment at the expense of animal performance, and it showed in my cash flow. But on the reverse side, the improvements in ecology over that time, I literally changed the way that grass plants express themselves. I went to college and learned you get really good grass species and you get not so good grass species, and you get the ones that you don't want grass species. And what I learned over that time, over the management time, is that you can improve a poor grass plant in theory into a much better grass plant by improving the environment around it, by improving the water cycle, improving the mineral cycle, enabling it to express itself differently. You change what that grass plant expresses itself as. And at the same time, you fill in all around that not so great grass plant, you fill in with much better grasses. So you land up on aggregate with a whole lot more production. Another beautiful part about this is how when you start working with nature, you need less chemical, you need less fertilizer, you need less herbicide, you need less of all of those outside inputs. When you start this process, it's beautiful to watch nature respond. More bugs, more plants, and a really valuable part, important part of holistic management and this visioning is when you start managing for what you want, suddenly all sorts of the things that you don't want, for whatever reason, are not there anymore. We so often in the mindset of managing for things that we don't want, that we actually create the environment that thrive, that encourages the things we don't want to thrive. That mindset change of, hey, we're going to invest and we're going to spend time on the stuff we do want and ignore, not put it out of our mind. We see it's there, but we're now focusing our attention and our investment on the stuff that we do want instead of investing in things we don't want. That mindset change is a game changer because of how you're investing for the things that you want, your timing, each dollar invested in what you want is now exponentially growing the outcome of what you want. It sounds trite maybe, but in reality, it's such a powerful concept and something that's reinforced through this decision-making process that we encourage people to think about.
It's everything. What you focus on expands. So when
Right.
you're focused in that way on what you want, then you're not giving energy to what you don't want. And that allows to shift, and your excitement and really digging into and doing the work and taking care of the things that you need to do opens up the opportunity and creates the space for that to be better. And I love that about the grasses. It's the same thing. It's perfect.
Yeah. I was out on recently, actually last week, I was out in South Africa on our ranch out there having some issues, but just looking at the ecology out there, entire areas where the trees have died. There's been effective grazing and recovery, and trees are dying. It's been taken years to get to that place, but to watch how the ecology's changed to favor tall, healthy, palatable grass species. It's phenomenal to see that because of we focus on what we want here.
Nice.
So the trees that are dying there, what trees are they?
They're mostly acacias and a species, Dicrostachys cineraria. It's very much like mesquite, tough, very hard wood. But by focusing on what we want there, it's
I
changing.
love that. Nowadays, finding time for in real life connection is a challenge in and of itself. So, I talked to Crystal about a modern spin on the classic farmers co op, and we'd be delighted if you join us. The concept is pretty simple: give $5, receive support. You donate $5 or more per month and gain access to the Texas Soil Sisters Co op monthly online meetup. This is a private but open dialogue where you can bring questions and receive support from our growing community. Maybe it's questions about industrial hemp production, or you're looking for land, or maybe a land steward, or connecting with alternative land use opportunities. Maybe you're in the beginning stage of off ramping from conventional ag like we are. We love passing along the powerful education we're receiving and helping other soil sisters and misters like you find solutions. So, if you're a gardener, land steward, farmer, rancher, or limited resource landowner, You're invited to join us on our monthly co-op call with your donation. Sign up at txsoilsisters.co/grow. These monthly meetings are not recorded. They take place on the third Monday of every month at 6 p.m. Central Time. Sign up at txsoilsisters.co/grow. The mesquites take over these areas, and it's just like with thoughtful consideration, feeding the soil, focusing on what you want. Yeah, they eventually can go away. Thank you for sharing that evidence.
It comes down to this. How do we change the situation to create the growing conditions for the things that we want? The trees that are there are only there because of prior management. I mean, you go back in the recordings of early settlers, what was growing. In my environment in South Africa, it's known that they were not trees. 20 years ago, I met an old man. He was 90 years old. And he pointed to the hill up there, Falkop, Grey Hillock, little hill over there. He said that was the only place we'd go on a Sunday with our donkey cart and fetch wood. There was no wood here. There were no trees here. And now it's choked with trees. The whole environment's choked with trees. And I believe, parts of Texas are similar. The records are just grassland. And it's much more than fire. Everyone says, it's the trees are there because of a lack of fire. It's much more complex. And the trees that are dying, by the way, it's not where it's burnt. It's the contrary. Where it hasn't burnt, the conditions have enabled. It's about mineral cycling. It's about microbes in the soil. It's about water holding capacity. When those things get to a threshold, there's this tipping point that happens. Obviously, fire does kill trees, but often it makes trees coppice. I mean, the brush that I'm talking about that's dying, if we were to put a fire through there, it would all coppice. It would all grow from the base. The above ground is going to be dead, and it'll sprout. And where there was one stem, you'll probably have 4 or 5 stems. So it's more complex than it's just a lack of fire. You burn and burn and burn, and you'll end up with fire-tolerant species. So, yeah, fire has a place. It's a valuable tool at times, but be careful of overuse. Yeah, let's understand.
Okay, you just set the stage for us to talk about Regen Ag School. So there are all of these different practices that become tools in our tool belt. And there's so many variables, whether it's what kind of livestock do you have, what's your soil type, what's your geography, all the things. Holistic management offers a proactive solution that's focused on this framework or path that can be applied regardless of what you're farming and ranching. It seems ethereal whenever we're just like talking about holistic management and like making your family happy and rebuilding the soil. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Absolutely. So I think the place to start here is basics. We need to have an idea of where we're going. So we start out with what's your goal? Because with the goal and the understanding of these are the values that we want to live by, this is what we undertake to live those values. So there's a component in there of commitment to living these values that we have agreed we share. And there's this long-term portion, this environment. It's not just ecosystem function. It's also about how we want people to perceive our business. How are we going to live this and grow this long-term interaction with our community? Because we are part of that community. Now we're looking at understanding the next portion that we're going to get into in the Regen Ag School is understanding our environment. Whether you're from Montana or Maine or Nova Scotia or California, your environment responds pretty uniquely. So we'll spend a while outside looking at the basics of how does the ecosystem function, and critically, what are grazing animals and predators' roles in making that environment healthy. So this is pre-huge human influence. How did these relationships work, and how can we see how healthy they are? Our role as managers, as stewards of land, is to mimic what nature did really successfully. If we can understand what our role is in mimicking natural processes, animals' critical role in these, wherever you are, animals have a critical role, grazing animals, and predators is what we're trying to mimic. So it's about what's a good amount of time for animals to be present, what's a good amount of time for animals to be absent. When animals are present, what are the positives? And what's the challenge in keeping animal performance in that interaction? I mean, the buffalo did it purely by the wolves hunted them, or didn't people were hunting them, or were not. They moved to get forage. They came back when the forage was right for them to come back. We need to learn what does it mean to interpret that, to look at that. So we're going to look at a portion of that. Unlike those wild animals, in whichever environment they were in, we've removed fences, so we need to now figure out how to mimic that. That's where the grazing planning component comes in. We're managing now for ecosystem process, but we're also managing for animal productivity. We've got to get the balance right. And there are times when you really need to focus on animal performance, and there are times when you really need to focus on improving ecosystem function. Let's not confuse those, as I did. We talk about getting it right and getting it wrong, and lead indicator monitoring. All the time, we're encouraging people, the managers, to look at what is going to be giving you the earliest signs that you're on track or off track. We assume that you're moving animals in accordance with the infrastructure that you have, or the infrastructure that you can afford to put in, whether that's electric fencing, whether that's virtual fencing collars, whether it's wind chimes. I mean, we hear about people in Australia, really big acreage. They literally feed next to wind chimes, and they move the wind chimes around, and the animals are always around the wind chimes just to get density on these huge stations. Whatever creativity you can figure out that's going to help you get animals at a place, utilizing forage, and giving those plants now time to recover for the next go around. So economics of animal performance and ecological performance, they usually are not all happening at the same time. And let's understand, whether it's sheep or camels or donkeys or whatever, how do we use the animals to mimic what nature did best?
You get this kind of instruction in a classroom at Regen Ag School, and then your mind grapes are blown and you're just like, okay, there's too much stuff. And then they're like, okay, now everybody come on out and we're going to go do a field trip. And then you get to practice the complex and confusing stuff that you just learned and apply it. And so I have a show and tell, because that's my favorite thing. So we have these little cards that we got at school that help us calculate what our animal days per acre are. And so you then go out into the field, look at the forage, figure things out, and put what you're learning to use. And that's so important for the retention of information and helping things sink in, because it's one thing, to read it in a book or to do a virtual class. But then when you do get to be boots on the ground, you start having those aha moments, or like, this is clicking, this makes sense. So I loved that about school. Sister, do you have something to add to that?
Well, it was so important to be able to go out and look at the land and have a visual for what we had just mentally consumed, because that I have a lot of theoretical knowledge. And one thing that the ag school, Regen Ag School, did for me was help me have some hands-on knowledge with people around me. And that was very important, because you can watch stuff on videos and you can listen to audios and you can read books, but to be in person with someone who has the experience and who is showing you, and you're looking and asking questions and they're explaining to you what you're looking at. It was the best time that I've had as a grown-up. Like, that was camp, 6 days of adult camp. And it made me so happy. And the way it's set up with the learning, with the classroom time, but then also the outside time. It was like they cared so much about our experience and that we learned the material, and then that we understood the material. And so, yeah, keep talking.
Wonderful to hear that. My vision for the Regen Ag School is really, it's not a deep dive into the how-to. It might have felt like it at the time, but it's really linking. It's an experience of linking all the different planning procedures together from a grazing perspective. So you've got, first of all, the goal. How does that tie to ecosystem function? How do you translate that ecosystem function knowledge into the grazing planning process, which Kirk Gadzia does so well? Then we're looking at the financial aspect. How do we analyze different business options in a real family scenario? I mean, the complexities in this family scenario are very much like reality. How do you sift through that information to come out with, well, these are the enterprises, these are the major segments of our business that we're going to extract, and then that all fits in with how we're going to do the grazing, how we're going to do the monitoring. Most of these planning procedures have built-in monitoring that's going to enable you. So once you've gone through the ag school, you've had an exposure to how these components fit together. That's what makes the framework, right? And it takes that while to fit them together. But without that, they can seem a little bit disjointed. And if you haven't worked through examples, then it does seem really theoretical, where there is actually a pretty comprehensive planning process behind it all.
And I love the financial planning aspect of it, because we got to sit down and we all had the framework in front of us. And just like a family, our little table got to talk about what's important for me, and what do I want to do, and what do I feel like this group should do. And so we were able to take a real life example that was someone else's farm, someone else's money, and then try to work with each other around what our focus was, but all toward the greater goal of making our business profitable and reducing our expenses, and really getting our enterprises that were going to be the best for the context that we were working in. And it was great. It was such important hands-on, detailed planning information that it really inspired me in my own personal life. So just to look at it differently, and the planning for profit. What was it? Income minus expenses equals profit. Income minus profit equal expenses. And so it's just like and then, which I know that in today's day and age, things are what they are, but that's why we're going holistic management, regenerative agriculture, because then that reduces the amount of inputs, that reduces our expenses that are required when we manage the land holistically. So, I mean, it's just a win-win-win situation.
Yeah, that planning for profit, when you first hear it, sounds, what are you talking about? But as you dig into the importance of planning a profit, if you don't plan for the profit, your expenses will always run up. I mean, that's how it is. Yeah.
Goes back to focus on what you want. We want to focus on our profit instead of sitting around worrying about focusing on our expenses. We focus on our profit. And man, it really is such a shift. And I live my life this way. And this class literally changed the way I thought about things. So anyway, it's just beautiful. I love that level of support and shift in focus that doesn't just change what you're doing, it changes your whole life. And then you're influencing the people around you in the same way.
Yeah, to that opening comment that Don Campbell, if you're going to make big changes, change the way you think. And that's literally what that's forcing you to do. It's to think differently on a big scale.
Yeah. The other piece of it is that there were 4 or 5 groups evaluating the same family land and the same financials, and we all come up with different solutions. So it's also the idea of there's not one right way to do this. And it's based on the personalities involved, how it might end up flowing out.
So I think it's worth holding on to that thought. Alan Savory and Stan Parsons were the originators of what is holistic management, the framework. And they started out as consultants. and realized pretty quickly that it's far more at stake here than a consultant can deal with. When you're in a ranching environment, it's complex. It's home, it's legacy, it's so much more than a regular manufacturing business. And hence this framework for management. It's not you should do this or you should do that. It's here's a process that you can follow. The areas you're going to be good at. You're going to be exceptional. Each of us has our gifts and our talents, and we have our weaknesses. How do you combine that into a management process that enables you to achieve whatever outcome you want? I mean, the fundamentals here are profitability and ecosystem health. Each piece of land is unique. It's different from your neighbor in some way. Your livestock are unique in your particular way. How do you change or manage for this beautiful outcome that you envision with the process? And that's what we offer. It's that process that enables you to achieve these multifaceted outcomes.
I like that. It's good.
So
Now, there is one thing that I remember from class. We are talking about focusing on what we want. We also focus on our strength. Like, don't try to take your worst piece of land, your worst 30 acres, and try to fix it. Like, what's doing well? What's performing well? Like, talk a little bit about that.
So, yeah, that's one of the decision testing questions is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. In whatever we do, we should be focusing on highest return, not necessarily on money, highest return on time, highest return on whatever the scarce input is. And if you extrapolate that to how we should be spending our time and effort versus how we do, case in point, on our ranch in South Africa, when I started out, I could see all these negative places, old fields that had been plowed and let go back, and they were capped and hard, lots of erosion gullies. In my mind, that's the place I should have gone to fix the first, because I was embarrassed by them. Looking at them, they have the highest potential. But if you think about where am I going to get the biggest return on my time and effort, is on my best soil. It's on my best land. You put fencing and effort into good and you get much better, a factor of 3, 4, or 5 times the return in a very short space of time. And where I went and wasted a lot of time and effort on the poor areas, on the erosion areas, when you look at an erosion area, where does the water come from to create the erosion? It's not there. It's up on the slope, way back at the far end or wherever. Spending time up there where I'm going to grow a lot more forage and reduce the amount of water that's getting to the erosion gully, well, that's where I should have been spending the time. Instead, I was trying to solve what was a visible problem rather than the origin of the problem. We do this to ourselves all the time. If I'd been using the decision testing process and asked myself, one of the questions is, where am I going to get the biggest return for my time or money spent? Well, it's a very obvious question. You speak to investment people, business people, they know this. As ranchers, we want to go to those poor patches because we're embarrassed by them, or it looks like there's nothing going on, so it must be a good place to invest, instead of asking, where's the best place? Honestly, where's the shortest piece of fence I can put in for the biggest return? Where would the animal density work the best? If I'm going to apply density, it's on the highest soils, on the highest return soils, on the best pieces of land. And of course, you're going to get far better return on investment and therefore have more money to invest in the poorer places. It's fundamental.
Yeah. And you also talked about when we're experimenting, we're not always going to be right, but if we can be right most of the time, we're still winning.
I think we taught, I think the origin of that is how our schooling system works and how we taught to pass and how it's embarrassing to fail, and failing's a bad thing. But recognizing the complexity of what it is to be a farmer or a rancher, it's a complex environment. And, in the example I use very, very often is if you happen to have your perfect management year this year and you move animals or you plant crops and the timing of the planting and the rain arrives and everything you do is just perfect for this year, and you write all that down and next year comes along and you do exactly the same thing next year that you did this year, chances you're going to have the same outcome are zero because everything else changes. I mean, you cannot put the stuff in a box and keep it sacred and that's the way to do it. Each year is different. We have to recognize that each year is different, whether it's rainfall, what's happening in our personal lives, what's happening in our cash flow. It's all dynamic all the time. And if we can make peace with that and realize it's never going to be the same and that we must be dynamic, somehow there's comfort in that. And with the comfort comes a planning process. Because if you're not planning and able to adapt, then you'll end up panicking or being behind the curve. To me, the power that I got out of holistic management was being intentional. I want this outcome. It's clear to me. I've got all these variables coming at me. The market's changing. Prices are high now. Cattle prices are high now. Are they going to be in a year's time? Who knows? Rainfall's pretty bleak, depending on where you are. Next season, you don't know. We're in a more arid time in the US than we've been for a while. But in wet cycles, you have dry years, and in dry cycles, you have wet years. Next season, nobody knows. You've got to plan for it as it comes. That's why the planning process really is valuable, because as it's unfolding, you had a plan, you alter that plan according to what's happening in the moment. It's a game changer when you have these plans written out and can adapt according to what's actually going on. No plan makes it very, very stressful.
Yeah, you saying that reminds me of one of my big aha moments at Regen Ag School was learning about drought planning.
Drought planning, yes, please, and thank you.
Just like, why have nobody talked to me about this before? Like, this is huge, and like looking at your calendar and identifying what is our drop dead date. If we have not had X amount of rain by this time, what are we going to do? What is our plan? That's huge for Texas farmers and ranchers to know a drought plan.
Anywhere and everywhere. Having a plan that you can execute. It's all about the time. If you remember the case study, it's about, well, if we have a plan, say it's the dormant season, the non-growing season, winter grazing plan. If you know how much forage you have at the end of the season and you reduce your livestock numbers at the end of the season to match your forage, you can keep so many more animals through that dormant season without feeding extra hay or really a minimal amount of hay, or planning how much hay you're going to buy up front instead of waiting, seeing what's going to happen and landing up having to either sell a lot of animals or buy a lot of expensive hay because you didn't know. That difference is massive. I think even more critical is we didn't work so much through it at Regen Ag School, but for the growing season now in the spring, having a what we call a drought trigger date. We come this far into the spring, this date comes around, it's going to be different for different parts of Texas. By the trigger date comes around, you need to destock. If you're at the trigger date, when it's time to destock, the longer you wait, the more at risk you are, the fewer animals you're going to be able to carry through. Being prepared with a plan really enables you to reduce your pressure and stress later on and make you money, because thin animals don't have value and thin animals don't reproduce very well. So, getting those dates right makes such a huge difference.
Well, and you having control, like you putting you know what's happening. If by this date.
Less gray hairs for sure.
Well, and so we did, we had just, I think, an afternoon, we did a field trip. And so we did talk about, livestock handling and a little bit about grazing planning. But that's another thing that HMI offers. In addition to Regen Ag School, there are like more intensive 3-day workshops on stockmanship and then also on grazing. Because I didn't feel like I had enough time with the animals, and I'm babysitting sheep right now during lambing season. And I sure wished I had a little bit more stockmanship classes.
So we are doing a stockmanship class early April here at Dixon Water Foundation. It's not strictly holistic management, but understanding how animals work with low stress. Dawn Hanto is going to be doing the majority of the low stress livestock handling training, practical how to, why to, when to. It was a real game changer in my farming operation, ranching operation in South Africa when we started doing low stress. Just understanding why animals do the things they do. We're around animals all the time, but we're not always observing. Pecking order has such a huge influence. How they respond, how they get stressed. Unless you're aware of these things, unless you're observing these things, you don't see it. So you only see the results of stressed animals. And Dawn does an amazing job of explaining and then showing and then enabling you to try it out. And watching an animal relax because it's not feeling threatened is quite something to see. Watching a whole group of animals relax, that you sort of watch this tension and then watch that dissipation, it's powerful. I used to say to some of my team and newcomers to the team, you don't have a driver's license yet. You haven't learned how to respond to animals. Watching particular lead animals and how they respond to you, and watch how the other animals respond to those lead animals, getting that appreciation, it's a game changer on how to move, how you respond, and how you get uptight or not around the animals, because they respond immediately to those cues that we give them. If you get stressed and uptight, that whole herd will stress and uptight, and you can see it. I mean, you can really see it happening. It's a tool. Watching animals respond placidly, calmly, move in a way that they're accustomed to, and that's not stressful, is very, very rewarding.
Which is what we want for all of us, especially for our animals. Yes.
And it's also great to help people see electric fence training animals, or getting them used to these virtual collars, the no fence collars and things like that. Being able, because I think oftentimes the mentality of an old school rancher, though things I've heard is like, oh yeah, our herd is not trained for electric fences. But then I saw how very quickly animals can be trained to them with my own eyes. Y'all touch on things like that as well in the stockmanship class, yes?
I'm not sure if we'll be doing training to electric fence, because to me that's something a little bit different. The collars and the fencing, the way I've understood it and seen it working, is that you literally set up the collars on an existing electric fence, that the animals maybe are used to the electric fence already. So now they associate the collars with the electric fence. And there's a warning, I'm getting close to this virtual line. They see it as a solid line and learn that association. I used electric fence very, very extensively on our property in South Africa, 138 paddocks, I'd say 90% of which were electric. And that's single strand permanence or portable. Wildlife get used to the electric fence without being trained. They get shocked a couple of times and they'll learn. That's a little bit different to me from handling animals and moving animals in a low stress way. They're not quite the same thing. Filling a chute with animals, without all the squeeze and all the equipment, that's very much part of what we learned to use low stress livestock handling for. How to fill a chute just by walking, the direction that you walk and your shoulder position relative to the animals, direction, speed of movement. Each herd of animals is different. You get highly strung animals, you get less highly strung animals. You've got to get closer to the ones that are tamer and more docile. But it's the same principles at play. and how you're positioning yourself, where your head is, how directly you're looking at the animals. From shoulder onto you, that's a different body language to I'm looking at you sideways over my shoulder. Counting animals through a gate, you move forward, they speed up, you move backwards. How do you position yourself relative to the animals, shoulder-wise, head-wise, look, direct eye contact? All of those things play a significant role in how animals respond to you. And it's useful to know.
Yeah, it is.
Very much
that.
so. And if you didn't watch the video version of this, Wayne gave us excellent demonstration when he was saying all that.
Seriously. Well, and it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. So I love that. Yeah.
And so the stockmanship stuff, this is more of like when we are working animals. Okay.
If you're handling, if you need to do vaccinations, you're moving a group. I mean, what we do is move animals to get the plant recovery times right. Having animals that are ready to move, easy to move, it makes a big, big difference.
Outstanding. And so that stockmanship class is on Leo Ranch in Decatur, Texas, April 4th. And the Regen Ag School, that is starting on April the 28th, correct? That's a 6-day course?
Yes.
All right. So those are the two coming up in April. And I noticed there's always online courses.
We do what we call the foundations, which is pretty much goal setting and ecosystem literacy. How do you understand the ecosystem? We do the holistic financial planning. We do holistic crop planning, which has a lot to do with laying out your crop fields and what you're going to grow where for all sorts of good reasons, planning it out so that you're ready for the variabilities and the unexpecteds. We do have a land planning that we occasionally run as well. So how to set up your infrastructure, what do you have in place, what do you want to see as the best case scenario, and then how do you implement gradually over time your best case land planning, but using the existing infrastructure. We also do succession planning, which I think is particularly successful. Transitioning, how are you planning for that? Getting on the same page.
Succession planning?
Yep.
We're here for it.
Yep.
That sounds exciting.
That is a very crucial piece. And again, something that gets touched on in Regen Ag School. There is, some focus that's put on that. So with Regen Ag School, you get the framework and you dip your toe into each aspect of it just enough to understand what you don't know. And we have all the tools that we need to continue learning, because at the end of the 6-day school, you know enough to be dangerous and you know enough to ask better questions.
And
I'd like to reframe that. I'd like to say you know enough to be inspired to learn more. Yes. Because I think that's what it's about. You can't start any journey knowing it all.
Well, and also, you have community. You have connected with the hub of this way of life that is going to support ourselves, our family, our health, our living, our soil, our animals, our ecosystem. So, I mean, it really is such a community, and it has been just so beautiful to connect with the people who are also having these ideas and wanting to do these things. So that's what was so thrilling for me, is the connections.
I don't think I've met anyone in this community who's gone it alone. Everyone who's met, because it is a change. It is a change. The way you think, change the way you do things can be daunting. I mean, let's face it. I think what makes the community pretty unique is the sharing. People they realize the need for support and therefore want to support. There's a lot of generosity of ideas, a lot of generosity in sharing, helping. Yeah, it's an amazing community.
Well, and if we are an amalgamation of who we spend our time with, what better community to spend your time with?
Exactly.
So the other piece of Regen Ag School that makes it so special is Leo Ranch and the Dixon Water Foundation and that whole property. So will you take a minute to just kind of paint a picture of that situation y'all have out there?
Fantastic. So Dixon Water Foundation has supported HMI, Holistic Management International, for a long time. They're a demonstration ranch managing holistically, doing pretty high density grazing, moving animals around. The original thought and reason is, if we don't manage for water, what do we have? And the inclusion of animals in a grassland environment, I mean, they are absolutely intertwined. If you don't have animals, you won't have a healthy grassland. And they're a working example of exactly how important that is. They do a lot of research into how good are their soils, how good is the carbon, what's the biodiversity of plant life, insect life, and bird life. They have really good data to show much better water infiltration, water holding capacity, and really good biodiversity in this part of Texas. So, yeah, really living holistic management, a real showcase of what the possibilities are.
And it's a very magical setting, great outdoor classroom space, kind of this indoor, outdoor, you're surrounded by nature, amazing food. Wayne grilled one day, even wearing a bunch of hats.
Yep.
And I think another point to add is that we're bringing in, again, different educators to cover different components. You'll have really exceptional educators walking through the different components, facilitating. It's a group of exceptional people who are
100%.
sharing their knowledge and information. So
I
really
agree.
Worthwhile. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Kirk was amazing. Josh and Tara, Linda. Yes. Everyone who is walking the walk.
And Hillary.
I love it.
We still say hello to Hillary.
Yes, I kind of thought Hillary might join you today. I wasn't sure. So tell Hillary we said hello and send our love.
She's supplying the tea.
Excellent.
Well, y'all do such a fantastic job at Holistic Management International. We appreciate the support that we've received. If anyone signs up for Regen Ag School and you use the promo code Soil Sisters 2025, no spaces, all one word, Soil Sisters 2025, they'll give you 10% off of your Regen Ag School. So do it or don't, but do.
Yes.
It does sound like a long time to invest, but it is so worthwhile. My original holistic management training was 7 days. The immersion is so worthwhile because you cut off from work, hopefully for a while. You're in this environment with like-minded people. You grow relationships, and you really get to see how the different pieces fit together. So I strongly recommend, and it's really well worth the price. It does sound like a lot of money, but for the subsidy that goes into it, this is an opportunity you really shouldn't miss out. It's life-changing.
Absolutely.
And you walk away with a thumb drive with all of the spreadsheets and info and all the different testing, all the different stuff that you learned. I like taking notes. So I have a notebook that I'm just writing it all down in. But if you're not that kind of a person, you will walk away with the thumb drive with all of the information on it, which is super helpful. And also the people that partner with HMI offer the opportunity for you to apply for scholarships as well. So if you really want to do this and you might need a little bit of help getting there, then, there are scholarships that you can apply for on the holisticmanagement.org website. The Soil Sisters were lucky to get a partial scholarship, and that's how we were able to go.
Yes.
And staying in a motel in Decatur isn't the sexiest thing to do with 6 days. But man, being out at Leo Ranch with the HMI crew and all these other bright-eyed regenerative ag students was well worth the whole thing. It was great.
The way that it's set up with, first of all, there was coffee and tea and snacks in the morning, and then we had our talk, and then there was delicious food for lunch, and then we were out and about. So it's like camp. They feed you very well. They are so kind. There was ice cream in the afternoon sometimes. So, I mean, it was just like, it was the best time, because I was a little nervous about 6 days, honestly. It went by in a flash, and I literally cried the last morning. I was like, oh my gosh, my friends. I felt like I'm going to miss them, but we've stayed in touch. So that's great.
All right. That's a Soil Sisters endorsement of Regen Ag School. I hope it's good, Wayne.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's lovely to see how people responded. I love that last day when people just sit and they're soaking in the experience and the friendship and the camaraderie. It's pretty special. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for what you do for our community. And we aren't able to make this early April Stockmanship class, but that is absolutely on our Soil Sisters bucket list.
The whole idea here is we're going to do the introductory piece, this one coming up in April, and we'll get more and more into it with time. Because like most things, it's a bit of a journey. You're going to experiment with something maybe you've not thought about before. Literally working animals, learning how little you might be aware of how receptive, responsive animals are to you. They are far more responsive than you think. You do little hand movements and they'll notice. If they think it's non-threatening, they'll relax. If they think it's threatening, they'll get all tied up and uptight. And practicing, it's like all things. So we'll be going deeper and deeper into low-stress livestock handling over time. And Dawn Hanto is an absolute master. She can load a herd of heifers into a trailer in the middle of a pasture. Don't know how she does it. I'm not nearly at that level, but gets the animal calm, gets them to understand where they're supposed to go. Really incredible to see what is possible. So,
nice.
Yeah. Right on. Well, looking forward to that.
Me too.
Okay, before we let you go, is there anything that we didn't ask you that is really important for you to round out our conversation?
Yeah, I just say, not that you've missed anything, just to say, as I think about what we've been talking about, this might sound a little bit airy-fairy. It's really not. It's really practical. It's really hands-on. It's really doable. Nothing that we do in the training is not practical rancher stuff. It's how to get the job done at a low cost and with an outcome that you want. That's what it's about. And if it sounds a bit airy-fairy and, well, that's not possible, it's you got to see it. You've got to experience it. And Leo Ranch is a real working ranch. They don't subsidize the animal side of the business at all. It's literally a standalone sheep and cow operation. It's worthwhile to see.
Well, and I'll tell you, Wayne, this is why I was loving you talking, because you're not airy-fairy at all. Like, airy-fairy is my department, and I'm just laughing because you are very practical, and these are steps to take to get where you want to go. So there's nothing airy-fairy about what you're talking about. And that is why I just love it, because it is hand in hand with my very airy-fairy way of living. So because my airy-fairy is also very practical. So anyway, it's the best. It's the best of both worlds. It's taking the steps that are actually moving you in the direction that you want to go. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yay.
Thank you so much to both of you for your endorsement, for your time. Yeah, it's really valuable.
Absolutely. So if you're working for your animals, you come out to Leo Ranch and they'll show you how your animals can work for you.
That is exactly right.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you at one of your next workshops, Wayne.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Connect with the Soil Sisters at txsoilsisters.co. Submit questions, guest or show ideas, and sponsorship inquiries. The Soil Sisters podcast was created and produced by Joanna Nuding. Editing and sound design are in the capable hands of the PodConnects Podcast Network.